Okay, hello everyone. This is Subsurface Talks, the podcast about CG, animation, 3D graphics, Blender, and the meaning of life. My name is DJ. I'm your host, and today I have with me Mr. Can I call you Niko?
Just Niko, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Niko. You may know him from the YouTube channel DemNikoArt, and he's been doing great on YouTube recently with his amazing Mavericks animated shorts series based on MegaMan X game series, which, if you don't know, we'll probably talk about a little bit and introduce it. So, hello Niko, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have you, and if you can say a few words about your background, like how you started with 3D and what got you into making this kind of independent animation production.
Yeah, sure. Hello, I'm Niko. I'm from Germany, and I'm also born in Poland. So, just for context, but I moved very early on to Germany, so I'm basically German. My background is basically like classical 2D graphic design. So for the last roughly 20 years or so, I was a graphic designer, like in advertising mostly. So mostly in print design. So when you imagine like everything that you could design, I did. So posters, flyers, logos, all that kind of stuff. So typical advertising stuff for graphic designers. But in that time, I also was using like After Effects a little bit of editing. So I always branched out a little bit. And I always was interested in 3D, but back then, like early 2000s or so, the landscape, 3D landscape was a little bit different than today. So the possibilities weren't really there. But I think like early 2000, I think like 2013 or so, I started using Cinema 4D because for the advertising agency, it was interesting to maybe for product visualizations or so small stuff, very small stuff. Like that, we tried to incorporate 3D. So I played around a little bit with Cinema 4D, but nothing really major. So I got to a certain point, but never above it because I didn't put that much work into that and too much time. So it stayed like really flat, like on a basic level. But I knew already like the concept of 3D, like how to navigate 3D space, and like the core concept was familiar with me for the last like 10 years or so. But then, like with many people, during COVID, that was basically my start when I found out about Blender. Weirdly enough, I never heard of Blender before, even though it's already been like for 25 years or so. And I think that was the time when 2.8 came out, and that was, I think, like a big spike for Blender, I believe, because they overhauled the whole UI and everything. So that suddenly got on my radar. And I played around with it, got immediately hooked. And I think within the first 3 months or so, I completely was already better at Blender than I have ever been with Cinema 4D. So that I got on that Cinema 4D level very quickly. And since then, I also transitioned from my 2D graphic design into 3D. So from 2020 on, like gradually, I do more and more 3D stuff for clients. So I'm a freelancer, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. But I mostly do now like product visualizations and product animations, product videos, stuff like that. So not just 3D, but also like editing and After Effects stuff, like the whole package basically. And it's eventually I would like to do only 3D. I still have like awesome clients that I don't want to miss. So for them, I still do graphic design, but new clients, new projects, I only look for 3D stuff. And that's basically what I do currently for a living. So client work and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's impressive. Like looking at the level of quality of the productions that you do with the Mavericks series, it's really awesome. And hearing that it's been just like how much? 3 or 3 years?
Four and a half years, roughly. Yeah, but I think
progression, I'd say.
I hear that sometimes that people say, wow, in just 4 years you created a whole like short film series. But I think my background, because I was doing graphic design for 4 years, I think that plays a big role in my ability to maybe level up a little bit faster, because I already trained my eye maybe for aesthetics or composition, stuff like that, for 20 years or over 20 years. So I think that gave me a little boost maybe in adapting into the 3D space from the 2D space. So I didn't start from zero, I believe. I already had like this little background that helped me a lot to learn Blender maybe a little faster than when someone starts from complete zero.
I would say that's the kind of fundamentals that are the same for design and for any kind of creative artistic work.
Absolutely.
You mentioned also you mentioned that you used After Effects and the editing work and stuff like that for advertising. I guess we'll talk about this in depth when we talk about the series, but I've prepared some questions about the cinematography and the editing, everything in this series.
Okay.
Seems like to fall into place.
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask about that, but still, sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the whole process, because seeing someone do this kind of a production on your own is always like it's really curious how you manage to pull it off, because usually these kind of things are done by teams of professionals. Each one specializes in a specific part of the pipeline, and you're kind of like one army. And I guess it's inspiring also for other indie creators, which I'm guessing are part of the audience of my podcast.
Okay, yeah, awesome.
So let's maybe dive into the series that kind of like blew up recently on YouTube, like the 5th episode. Yeah. Some people probably saw it as the first one, but it got really well on YouTube. That's true, yeah. How much views does it have right now? I think it's around 100,000.
I think the 5th episode is almost at 100,000. I can just quickly check, but I think it's almost at 100,000. And my 2nd episode, that was my most like popular one. That is also at almost 100,000, but it took like 3 years for it to reach that. And this one now, in just 1 week or so, reached almost 100,000. So that's a big difference for sure.
Yeah, and I'm curious about the mechanics of this kind of success, which it kind of brings me to the most popular tutorial on YouTube, which is Polyshort's Spider-Man tentacle video, right? He had like this perfect mixture of YouTube tutorial, so something made with Blender and a tutorial, but it was based on a very popular IP. And it was, it caught the eye of everyone else just interested in the Spider-Man thing. So I'm guessing this might be the case for your video. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about the Mavericks thing and where it came from. Like, what is it all about? This whole Mavericks.
Okay, so that was first of all, it was not a conscious decision to start a series. It just naturally evolved into that. It all started when I was starting using Blender. I was looking for something to practice on. So it was just an exercise at first. And I was never like, I liked those games back in the day when I was a child. And I had always like fond memories about the games, but I was never like a long-term fan up until today that I always loved the games and always played them every day. It was just a fond memory from my childhood. But I always remembered those characters. And when it came to learning Blender, I remembered their like official artwork. And I thought like, okay, that might be a cool exercise to try to recreate those. They are like made of pretty simple shapes, but there's also some complexity, but the colors are very, very simple. They're more like cartoony. So nothing too fancy. So I thought, okay, let's start by applying what I learned in tutorials, apply that to my own little small project in creating this character. And no like human faces or whatsoever. So I thought like, okay, this might be easy. No big challenges at first. So I recreated like the octopus character, which became later on my first episode. But then gradually, when I was happy with this, I just wanted more. Okay, let's make him more realistic. So he lives underwater. So let's learn how to do Rust, for example. And then I made him a little bit more realistic. But then I figured out, okay, Rust on a cartoony character looks weird. So I redesigned him a little bit more to be realistic, made out of real world shapes, kind of like pipe shapes and stuff like that. And then I had the character, and I thought, okay, he needs an environment. So he lives underwater, and weeks later, so that wasn't just like a few days. It took me a long time, but I created like this environment for him. And then I thought like, okay, that looks cool. I have a nice picture. But then there was this urge to do more and more and more. And so I knew like basic keyframe animation from After Effects mostly. So I thought, okay, I'll think I can manage to animate a camera around him, just like a spiral. And I added a little bit of story in there, like, okay, he just saw his friend like being dead on the ground, and he's like, oh no, doing like this kind of thing. But the main animation there was just the camera floating around him. And that was basically the first episode, and it was just like a fun side project that I thought, okay, that's cool. But then I posted it in like MegaMan fan groups, stuff like that. I thought like, because the game is super old, but there are still like small like niche fan groups. And I thought like, okay, let's show them. Maybe they'd like to see the characters in a new light. And people liked it a lot. And they said, okay, yeah, now do the next guy. And I thought like, I don't know. I would like to do a lot of stuff. I still hadn't found my way, my path. So, but I thought like, okay, sure, why not? So, okay, let's do one more. And at that point, I realized one thing is that it would be very interesting to try to create or recreate each character of the game, because each character has their own thing. Like you have like this underwater creature, you have the eagle. They are all animal-based kind of robots. The one lives in the forest, and they all have their themes. And I realized that, okay, it would be a great way to learn Blender by focusing on each character at once. And then I had specific tasks and challenges that I would tackle. So I thought, like, okay, let's do the eagle character next. And for that, I will learn how to do maybe bigger environments. Because his video game stage is like an airport. So I thought like, okay, it would be interesting to learn how to create big environments. So that was part of the second episode. And I immediately thought like, okay, if this guy has an animation, this guy also gets an animation, but also a little bit better. So the whole thing kind of spiraled out of control from an exercise to suddenly, okay, I'll do the characters for the fans, basically, also for me, but also as an exercise in Blender, because I can learn specific disciplines of Blender while making those short films. And this basically stayed up until today. With each episode, I tackle new challenges, new interesting ways of using Blender, and I try to learn them while also having a great result in the end. And now we're episode 5, and I have no way of getting out of this thing. Now people will definitely want all their characters created, and I already promised people that I have a long-term plan, which I really have, and it's like a whole big story for the whole series. And now I'm here. So that's basically how it started, just with a small exercise that suddenly blew up into this big thing.
Yeah, and this it seems like you picked the story from the game, which seems like a simple, platformer type of shooter or mission game. Pretty simple, but I was surprised. I didn't know the game very very well. It was not my thing. I was more in the PC gamer world, not in the Nintendo, because this was like a typical Nintendo game.
That was for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I've watched one long video where a guy kind of dived into the lore of the whole story behind the game.
I saw that too.
And it's so it's so impressive. Like it's a big kind of like series of stories intertwined together, and all the
half of it
characters
I didn't even know. Yeah, I'm not an just because I have this created the series doesn't mean I'm an expert on the story and on the lore and on the games at all. I knew the game back then and a few more the sequels, but I'm no expert in the story. So I also saw that video and I was very surprised to know how much there is also to those characters. So I will definitely use that going forward to when I do more of those.
Mm-hmm. And I watched all the 5 episodes, and it seems like you can see the progression from the simplicity of the first one to the more and more advanced storytelling, as you mentioned, the story part.
Yeah.
It kind of builds up, and the next episodes always have a little bit deeper narration in the whole.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say this is like a cinematic experience in the latest episodes. It's like a short form, but it's got a story. Everything is kind of like deliberate. You can see that you really thought out the shots, the way that it's even narrated. So I'm wondering how you approach the like it from the ground up, the whole process. How do you start with building up the story?
That's interesting because it usually is different for each episode, but it starts. So I think up to this episode, or even to episode 6, to the next one, I had the stories very early on already fixed. Like when I created episode 2, I think roughly around that time, I already had those ideas. How they initially started, I'm not sure, but what I can say is that I have a weird approach in story. For example, for the 3rd episode with the forest creature, with the chameleon. That usually, I didn't have a good story. I knew only the character is like a little bit crazy, I would say. So he's, I thought like, okay, it would be cool to do some fun animations with him, like climbing on trees or whatsoever. But then I was searching for music for the episode, because I just use from Epidemic Sounds or stuff like that. I just use the music from there, and I found this really cool track that ended up in the episode. So if you watch it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I was looking for something to use it for something else, but I just listened to the music, and I basically like closed my eyes and I listened to the music. And suddenly, like those images of a calm forest came into my mind, and I thought, like, okay, that kind of fits the forest aesthetics of the other character that I wasn't planning on using this music on. And I imagined, okay, what could happen while the music is playing? And it's very calm, it's very relaxing, like almost like fairy tale-like music, and as I said, I had other plans for him, but somehow in my mind, it all came together. It kind of fit. And the great thing if you look for music, like, for example, Epidemic Sound or Free Sound or whatever, many tracks have like a story arc in of themselves. And, oh, hello.
Yep, we have an interruption of my daughter.
No problem. So I realized that music has its own story arc. Music oftentimes has a beginning, middle, and end. They sometimes have like this beat that goes up and then it goes down, like almost like a suspension curve. That it's like calm, then suddenly something happens, then it gets calm again, and then the big finale. And when I listened to the music, I saw like a story evolve in my head, and that's how kind of like the story was created in my head, just by listening to music, thinking about the character, and then I just saw things happen, like just story beats. And then I knew, like, okay, when the music swells up, that would be cool if something big happens. Then it calms down again. That would be cool if something emotional happens. But I still didn't know what exactly. But I knew, okay, now I have story beats that I can like connect later on. And that's basically how the story for the 3rd episode evolved. So I knew it starts very calm. So I thought, like, okay, let's start super calm. Because all the, just for context, all my episodes take place after the first game, after all the bosses are beaten. but they are not really dead. They are just defeated. And so I thought, like, for the third episode, okay, let's start very calm. The music is very calm, so we start also with a calm topic. So he's just laying there, and the music makes all those beats, and that gave me the inspiration of creating those story beats also, and that was basically what happened. And so I don't really have like a formula, but I can definitely say that finding music very, very early on can be very inspiring, and that leads to more ideas and more it's just super inspiring. The same for the fourth episode, that I knew I wanted it to be a little bit more chaotic, more frantic, and when I found a certain music piece, it was very like horror thriller-esque. And that also gave me, suddenly just by listening to it, that gave me a lot of ideas. But it also played together with seeing other people's stuff, obviously. So you're always inspired by other people's stuff. And I saw this one short film. It was just, I think, 30 seconds or so by, I can't really name this person from the top of my head. But I saw this little short film. It was very fast cut. And it was like this one frame or this one shot that was very inspiring of like a tunnel, but it was all debris. It was all basically rubble, but the lighting was very interesting and stuff like that. So I remembered that piece. I had it on my folder somewhere. I thought like, okay, putting my character in there, combined with that music, that suddenly gave me like the spark for the tone already. And from then the story kind of evolved. So I just needed this one initial idea. What will be the tone? What will be the style? What do I want to learn next? Obviously. So each episode is a new learning opportunity. So I thought like the fourth episode will be one very fast cut, very fast edits, very chaotic, frantic, because the character is about like power, energy, stuff like that. So I thought like that would be a good fit. So all those things kind of came together and resulted in the episode. So yeah, I don't have like this strict story process. It just, sometimes it just happens.
And it resonates me because I also have much interest in music. I used to play music back in the days of
awesome.
academy. Some rock music. And,
what instrument?
I played bass and guitar.
Awesome.
So generally swapped instruments for different stuff. But I'm getting this kind of feeling of kind of like a music video from especially from the fourth episode that you mentioned. It has that vibe.
Yeah.
Also reminded me of some videos from. Ash Thorpe, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's also doing a podcast, so and he's doing like a these kind of, I would say, they're not very tangible shots. It's not very descriptive of what's being shown. It's more about the mood, about the impression, about the light, the dynamism of camera and stuff like that. Yeah. You don't always know what you're exactly watching, but you get the feeling.
Exactly. That was basically my goal for that episode, to be informative so the viewer knows what's happening, but play more with the mood and to make the viewer feel a certain way. So that was more important than telling a cohesive stories in the beginning, but I still wanted it at the end that you know what happened in the last 2 minutes. So that everything coming together. So in the end, you know, okay, all those cuts in between, now I know what that was.
Yeah, I definitely encourage anyone listening to the podcast to give it a watch. You know, just sit down, relax, and watch the 5 episodes, so you'll get a better understanding of what we are talking about. But I guess maybe someone can just like listen to the podcast and then go and watch the whole show.
That's probably also interesting to just imagine what we're talking about actually, and then you'll get the context later on and everything makes sense. Sure.
Exactly. It's like talking about cinema. I'm also listening to a podcast where the guys are talking for 3 hours about a movie that lasts half of that time, for example. It's very interesting, and you can find so many interesting thoughts about the movie that you didn't even think about when you are watching a great movie.
Definitely. I love movies. That's also one of my biggest inspirations for creating the series is that I've always, my whole life, loved movies, TV shows, like pop culture in general. Up to this day, I consume it daily, basically. I watch movies and series and YouTube all the time. So that also plays a big role into getting into my series and into my work, for sure, because you're always inspired by stuff like that. So if anybody wants to create their own series, I would always say first watch a lot of pop culture stuff, what you're interested in, and that's super inspiring. Seeing other people's work, it always flows into your own creations. So yeah, definitely.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask is about the cinematography and what's the inspiration behind it. So when you mentioned this. Let me ask you who are your cinematography role models, like the favorite directors?
Yeah. So I would say favorite directors. I always liked David Fincher. I always liked his style. Spielberg was back in the day always my role model, up to this day, obviously, but back then with Jurassic Park and stuff like that, I was really big into Spielberg. And J.J. Abrams, I like his work a lot, especially since Lost. I loved Lost, so that was a big inspiration for me. Since Lost, I believe that was when I first realized how powerful music can actually be in creating a mood. For some reason, with Lost, I remember the music very, very vividly because it created such great moods and moments. I think that was Michael Giacchino that did the music. He's now pretty big composer, I believe. And but also, David Fincher, what's it called? Denis Villeneuve with Dune and everything. But everything that he did before also, it was just like Arrival, for example. These movies that set certain moods and certain tones, I really, really love that stuff. But recently for this series directly, I would say my biggest inspiration is not certain directors, but certain studios. It's Love, Death and Robots on Netflix. That's my big thing, I would say. That really when I saw that, I knew exactly. I knew kind of in what direction I want to go. But when I saw that, I knew exactly. Okay, this is my goal. To have this animation. I mean, animation is a very broad spectrum, but when you tell people about animation, they usually think of Pixar, Disney, all those kind of stuff, like very stylized things. But Love, Death and Robots kind of introduced me to the more adult-themed animation. It's more brutal. It's more. The themes are more mature, I would say. It's very grim, very dark, not always super happy, and that showed me that I knew the concept was before Love, Death and Robots already existed, but this made it kind of mainstreamy, or the public suddenly it was very successful, so the public now accepted it as animation can be something different, not just Pixar, but it can be also it's not just for kids, basically. So that gave me the last boost to approach this, to go to a little bit more kind of mature route with my series, and that's what I want to explore more, for sure. So my series is based on kind of like children's games, even though always adults still play it, and I still play it also. But it's a very cartoony style for the games. I think it's like a little bit based off. It has like an anime kind of style, but translating that into like a more realistic tone, and also to take those story beats that are also sometimes very dark, but are presented not really dark, in the games to translate them into the real world and presenting them what they really are, what they actually are, and how would they look like in the real world. That was that spark came from Love, Death and Robots, and now I want to pursue that similar route also.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think it's kind of typical for Japanese culture, like pop culture. It's very much like a lot of things seems like it's for kids. It's like cute, a little bit funny. But even in those funny little stories, like if you look at the game, I did the research about the lore of MegaMan and the MegaMan X series specifically. It kind of like turned the story into a little bit more serious background story for the characters. It's like it's all about total annihilation, like an apocalypse of some sort. It's like about viruses spreading across the world. So like
it's pretty dark at some points, for sure. Yeah.
A lot of these, perhaps because the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan specifically. They have this specific, thing about big explosions and stuff.
True.
All the Godzilla stuff.
It shapes the culture. Events like that shape a culture for sure. And it even flowed into the MegaMan franchise for sure. It's when you see it like depicted in like a cartoony way or like a pixelated video game way, you don't think much of it. But when you read the story or do research or hear people talk about it, there's the basis of it. It's very serious and very, very mature, actually. So, yeah.
So I'm thinking about what are your plans for, like, you've released the 5th episode of the series. Are there any specific plans for the next episodes already?
There are. So when I started with the characters, I didn't start with MegaMan because he has a human face, and I think that was too big of a challenge. So I started with the 8 boss characters from the game, and now basically that plan evolved into, okay, let's do all the 8 boss characters first, and then we'll continue with the other characters. So that's basically the plan, for each 8 of the Maverick bosses to have for them to have their own episode. So I reintroduced them into the story each by each, point by point. And that way we get to know the characters first, because the series is not just for the fans, it's also for everyone else. So this Blender exercise keeps continuing. I'll still try to tackle new things, and I will do all the 8 boss characters. And after all those 8 episodes, we'll have the characters, and we have kind of like a basis for their story. And then the plan is to create like final episodes, so where all the stories come together. And in the 9th episode, we'll see MegaMan X for the first time, what he's been up to in that time. And then everything comes together into a big finale, and it's gonna be probably 5 episodes currently. I have idea. First, the idea was just, okay, have a 9th episode where they all kind of meet, and that's something happens. I still didn't know what to do. But then all those ideas came, and now I have a plan for actually 5 episodes currently. I don't know if this will evolve into more, but currently I have a plan for 5 episodes, five final episodes. So yeah, the whole plan is 13 episodes in total. That will probably take me, roughly it takes me like 6 to 9 months per episode. But there's also like a buffer time where I do side projects and life comes in between. So roughly 1 episode per year, which is not very efficient, I would say. But with that pace, the series will probably go on for the next like 5, 6, 7, 8 years maybe until it's finished.
Well, if you say it's not efficient, I'm recalling the production of Watermelon Girl, a short movie. Took I think 5 years for Southern Shortly.
5 years, okay. I think, I mean, I often am asked, so how long did it take you? And I find this question always hard to answer, because it always sounds like it took me 1 month. Then it sounds like I worked nonstop on it for 1 month. Or if I say 6 months, then people think every day 8 hours or so. But that's not the case, because you go on holiday, you have weekends, you work, do client works, or you don't work at all. So it's tough to get something from that information, because it's not very precise. So when Southern Shotty says 5 years, I don't believe he worked on it every day for 5 years. It just, from the beginning to the end, took him probably 5 years. But I'm pretty sure there were some gaps where he didn't work. You always have like those low points where you maybe you were sick, so you didn't do anything, and getting back into that work takes a long time. So maybe you've been sick for 1 week, but it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to get back into that mood, into that loop of working on the thing. So yeah, it's very hard to talk about how long something takes. Describing it in hours is maybe better, but when do you count the hours you've worked on something? Because it's almost impossible unless you record every step. Then you have maybe a recording of all the time. But yeah, so when I say it took me 9 months with the last episode, it sounds short, but there was also a period where I just worked on it nonstop, like the whole of September roughly. When I knew I would do the talk at the Blender conference, suddenly the pressure kicked in, and I knew, okay, I need to shift to the next gear. And so I worked almost like 24/7 on it, every 3 minutes. But in reality, if I just keep my pace regularly, the whole episode would take probably over a year. So yeah, work-life balance still needs to be happening. So that's very important for me. I'm just not sitting there the whole day and working just on the episode. So there's also life in between.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this part as well. Mm-hmm. So maybe let's dive into that work-life balance, and generally, like, people might be wondering how you manage to support yourself financially while doing an independent production of that scale.
Yeah,
you mentioned that you're doing freelancing as well. Mm-hmm. So how does it work for you?
It's tough, actually. So first of all, I have a girlfriend, and she's super supportive of it. So if you have a partner, it's not always easy, because you want to spend time with your partner. You have your work, you have your hobby, basically. So putting all those things together is tough. But usually, for me, when I break down my week, for example, it's usually that I work for client work roughly until like late afternoon, and then mostly evenings and nights are dedicated to working on my personal projects. Weekends usually I don't. Sometimes like maybe a few hours on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. But usually, the evenings are mostly dedicated for that work, but not every weekend. So not every evening. So we have, with my girlfriend, we have some days where we say, okay, let's do some me time, so we leave each other space for their own hobbies, stuff like that. So that helps a lot to work very focused for 6-8 hours in one sitting on the episodes, but usually it's when I'm very deep into the production and I want to finish it, it's usually the evenings are mostly dedicated for that. But sometimes you have also quiet days where there's not a lot of client work, so I try to use that time also to finish maybe not super important stuff, because I can focus better in the evening when there are less distractions. During the day there's always something going on. People messaging you, or doing chores, or life. And so there I can't really focus that much for too long of a time. So I mostly do like small side tasks that need to be happen, but I don't wanna. So I use that time mostly for that. But when I really wanna work focused on a certain thing, that's mostly, I would say, like 3 times a week, the whole evening up to sometimes early night, 1-2 a.m. sometimes, because that's where I'm mostly very focused. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, for each episode you kind of tackle new areas of Blender or new techniques or challenges for improving the whole quality and different areas of the whole production. I wanted to ask you about the last episode. What was the biggest challenge? What you've learned with the experience, and how do you learn? Like where do you learn from?
So with that episode, my biggest challenge, the one I wanted to learn, was improve my animation skills mostly, because in this episode, for the first time, I animate like human-like characters. The robots before that were all very, like, they have like 4 limbs basically, but they, except for the first one, he has 8 tentacles actually. But for the others, they have like arms and legs. So, but they never really like moved like humans. But with this episode, I have 15 characters in total in there, and most of them have a humanoid shape. And animating those characters, I knew at a certain point I'd like to be able to animate human characters. So I wanted to tackle that, and that was definitely the biggest challenge. So what I didn't realize, for example, was that walk cycles are really, really difficult. Like the most basic thing, one of the first things that you learn as a character animator, I believe, are walk cycles. And I really struggled with that, because that's surprisingly hard, because we all know how a walk looks like, a human walk. And it's basically like with the uncanny valley with faces. As soon as just one little thing is off, the complete like the look of the walk feels off, and something's weird about it. So I realized that very quickly that I need to really nail down the walk cycle, the animation. So that was a big challenge. And also I decided to immediately not just do walk cycles, but also like fight animations. So I thought, like, I don't want to start slow. I just want to jump head first into this whole animation bubble and just do like one of the hardest things, which is walking, running, fighting, all those complex stuff. Because sometimes you need to really like challenge yourself, not just dip your toe into the water. No, just jump right into it. And I thought that would be fun. So I think animation, and especially interactions with characters, with each others, that was the biggest challenge. But also I found it very fun and very exciting, because I also love like watching interesting fights. So I just wanted to see, okay, let's dive deep into that kind of thing. And for that, I even rented a yoga studio for a few hours and went with a friend into that. And we played out all those movements and recorded everything. So I have a video also coming out probably soon, where I compare the final animations to this reference footage that we recorded. So people can see, okay, how we played out and how it turned into the animation in the end. So that was very, very fun to just imagine what would happen in the fight choreography, which was also a very big challenge, just to come up with things that would happen. I'm not a choreographer. I don't know how fights work, but I watched a lot of movies. I collected a series of clips from movies that have interesting fights, and I tried to recreate those. But yeah, so overall that was the biggest challenge. And also there are no cuts in the episode. It's just one camera move through the whole thing, almost for over 4 minutes. So because the episode has this time theme, I wanted to support that without any cuts. So that was also one of the biggest challenges, but also a fun one, to never cut, to just have one camera move through the whole scene back and forth and never pan away or whatever. So I think these two things were the biggest challenges. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, so the second part of the question was also how do you acquire the knowledge about animation, for example? Do you have like specific YouTube channels that you go to, or maybe you did some course on it, or just experiment and test your own thing?
I actually did the course Alive by Pierrick Picot. that was very helpful to understanding the core concept, definitely. But what I found very difficult, like in the YouTube space in general, like finding tutorials, is that when you find tutorials for animation, you usually, like I would say, like 90%, you find animation tutorials for cartoony characters, actually, for that Pixar kind of style. So when you see tutorials for walk cycles, for example, you often see like those very exaggerated walk cycles, like when a Pixar character, using the term Pixar character, but I think we all know what I mean by that, like more of like a child-friendly kind of stylized character. And they have specific movements that fit the style. And when you look for courses or tutorials for animations like that, you mostly find these kinds of animations. And that was a little bit tricky because I tried to go for more subtle animation style, more kind of quote unquote realistic and not super exaggerated. So finding things that I can use in my videos was pretty tricky, actually. And that was one of the main reasons why I actually decided to record myself for those animations, because I knew those specific things it's hard to find. I found, as I said, some movie clips that have interesting fights in them. That was very helpful. But because I had specific ideas, I decided, okay, let's record myself with a friend, do all those movements, and then I have this perfect template, this blueprint basically for the animations to do those. But otherwise, it's basically just looking at something and analyzing it frame by frame and trying to figure out, okay, what makes the movement feel how it feels. And what I realized very quickly is also with my own reference footage is how much, for example, the shoulders are part of a certain feeling of a certain movement. So analyzing all body parts at certain points in time was very helpful, because then you understand why a certain move feels or looks like it looks. So why is a punch very very visceral? When does a punch feel not very hard? When is it hard? And then you realize, okay, it has to be fast, but what happens with the upper body in that moment? What happens with the head and with the shoulders? All those stuff, when you animate all those parts, you realize you have to specifically look at those and analyze just this one little bit of the body to understand, when it all comes together, why this certain move feels like it feels. So in the end, yeah, it's just tutorial-wise, it was basically just this one course. Everything else is just seeing a person do this certain move and analyze it frame by frame and see and try to figure out why it looks that way.
Yeah, so it comes down to the reference and consciously
in the end,
analyzing.
Just observe and try to recreate it. And with videos, you have this perfect thing. You can import it into Blender, put it next to your character, put the frames forward until it reaches the end. Put your fist of your character also at the end, and then look at the in-betweens, and then you'll get the speed. You know when a certain body part is where, and you just mimic it. It's just basically mimicry. But that lets you understand the whole thing. So after a while, you won't need the reference because you understand what happens with the body when doing a certain move.
Okay, so one more. Like if we're into the technicals of doing the production, like the animation, there's also like I've seen one of the breakdowns that you did for, I think this was this chameleon episode. There are a lot of interesting effects there. I really like the way he kind of dissolves into being invisible, very much like a Predator style thing. And there's this little splash on the water, and you show how you did this with video cards. Like I wanted to ask about these little hacks or tricks that people, because this kind of big production is always super overwhelming, so people almost every time like Ian Hubert, for example, he comes up with some cool idea to make this thing easy and approachable and fast, for example.
Yeah.
So do you have any kind of like magic tricks up your sleeve that you would like to share?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So first of all, I forgot to mention when you said when we talked about directors and inspirations. Ian Hubert is one of my biggest idols. Basically, I was lucky enough to meet him actually in LA. Awesome guy, and he basically introduced me into this kind of hacky workflow because oftentimes when you watch Blender tutorials, they often teach you how to perfectly execute the topology and UV unwrapping and adding details. But because he's also doing those big projects mostly by himself, I realized, okay, you don't need to be perfect in every way. You can hack your way into a certain result. So he is one of the biggest inspirations when it comes to cutting corners where you need to or where you can. And so that he gave me the inspiration of like, don't apply those perfect processes that you learned from tutorials everywhere. When you have a certain thing in the front, yes, it needs to be perfect. But if something's in the background, blurry and in the dark and out of focus, then you don't need perfect topology. You don't need a lot of details. You can basically just put a photo of an object there and nobody will care because the focus is somewhere else. And funnily enough, this is also one of my biggest points when I will do the Blender conference talk, because I will be talking about the film, and efficiency is basically my main point. Because as you said, so oftentimes people wonder, how is it possible for one person to create like a 3, 4, 5 minute long film in just a few months? And it comes down to being very efficient. So those little hacks, over time you kind of realize you get the eye of what is important, what is not. And especially it's very interesting to analyze yourself when you watch a movie, where you look at the screen. And you realize that we are very easy to distract with certain things. So when you play your cards right, when creating a shot, you can distract a person with a certain thing. For example, you hear that a lot, that you always look at the brightest spots at the screen when something's interesting. In video games, that's very important. It's a way of guiding the player through the level. And for videos and films, it's also the same. So you can kind of guide the viewer's attention to a certain spot, and then you can rely on that. You can be sure that the viewer will look at that. And also keep in mind that you, while producing the whole thing, you watch your film over and over again. Some shots you see 30, 40, 50 times, and you see many mistakes left and right. But you have to get into the mindset of the viewer that he will probably just watch it once, maybe twice. Like if you have hardcore fans, maybe 3, 4 times, but that's it. So try to work towards that goal for the average viewer that looks at it once and won't look for those mistakes that you as a creator do way more. So focusing on that gave me a lot of freedom to not put a lot of work into all the surrounding things that are not important at that scene on that shot. So that was one of the biggest realizations for me, that you have certain focus points that need attention, but certain things don't need attention at all. So you can get away with, like, for example, with the water splash. It's just, for those who haven't seen it, I just recorded a water splash on my balcony, and I put it in there. It's like a 2D video, basically. I put some transparency in there. I think I just applied a glass shader on it with some normal maps. And because it was just in the corner and very low resolution and a little bit dark, it was totally fine. I didn't need to do a fluid simulation or whatsoever. So with that one, I knew, okay, I don't have to go like overboard with the whole. It doesn't need to look good in close-up. The purpose of each shot and the purpose of each object in the scene needs to be known first, and then you can know how to approach it. So that's why I will also do this in my talk. But for example, setting up the camera as soon as possible is one of the biggest or the most important aspects for me for creating my shots. Because as soon as you know the position of the camera, you know exactly where to put in the work and where not. So as soon as you have the camera fixed, you animate it, you roughly, it doesn't have to be perfect, but roughly you know the position of the camera, then everything evolves from that point on. Because then you know this object will be in the background. So you know for that thing, I will put maybe half an hour on it. It will be in the background. It's just to fill the environment, and you know exactly what will be close, and that way you can be like perfectly efficient with creating those proper assets for the scene. So I would highly recommend for anyone who's trying to do a short film or an animation, set up the camera as early as possible in the process, with like some blocking out the scene with just a few cubes, and as soon as you have that, you have this perfect blueprint to know where to put in the work and where just hack through your scene and just put something in the background as a 2D object maybe, or just put a photo texture on something, put it in the background. It will be out of focus, so don't worry about it, seriously, because the viewer won't care in the end. Yeah, look at Ian Hubert's videos. He, when you're on his Patreon, he explains some of his processes, and this is super inspiring because he also talks about like the viewer looks at this thing. Don't worry about that thing in the background that it looks perfect. Don't worry about it, seriously. And that's basically how I approach my videos, and I fine-tune that process with each episode. And with this one, I was very, very hacky actually. So all the background elements, I think I found one big like 8K texture. I think I bought it for like a few dollars, like a mechanical or techie kind of texture. And you just have simple shapes in the background. You slap it on there, and it already looks like some complicated mechanical wall or an object. But you don't really worry about it because you have a main character in the foreground that's doing some stuff. So know that the person will focus on the character. It's just background set design. Yeah. So that's basically my approach to the whole thing. Efficiency, very important.
Yeah, so if anyone is curious about your hacks and approaches to this, like you mentioned Ian Hubert's Patreon, I guess you also have a Patreon site.
Yes, I have a Patreon. Very, very important. Yeah, yes, I do. That's the best way people can support the production of the whole series. It would be awesome to just rely on that, but it's currently not enough to not do client work, but it would be awesome to do so, to focus just on the series. That's my main goal, long-term goal, I believe, I would say. So for people who are interested in seeing some behind the scenes stuff, I do that mostly on my Patreon. I early access to the videos. I also share my assets with the community. So yeah, for anybody who wants to support the series and me and is curious about what's going on behind the scenes, that's the best way to support this whole project.
All right. Of course, like if anyone wants to search online for your creations, it's all on YouTube. DemNikoArt, right?
Everywhere. When you just find your the social platform that you are most interested in and just look for DemNikoArt, you'll find me. I'm on most social media platforms. So, and I'm mostly on almost all of them. I'm equally active, so you won't miss anything if you're not on this or this side. So yeah.
Yeah, when I read the comments under the videos, like the people were impressed by the short animation series, and they mentioned that this is how a MegaMan movie should look like. So big expectations put in your shoulders from the dedicated fan base.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I was wondering whether someone from the company that developed the games, I think it was Capcom, right?
Yeah.
Has anyone contacted you for some?
Not at all. I don't. It's hard to say because it's not my personal IP, so it's tricky, and I don't know what their mentality is towards things like that. I heard from other people that they are very supportive of fan art and fan work. So I don't think I'm in trouble or anything because I support the series and I help keeping it alive basically, or in the mindset of the people. So I think they appreciate it. But being a big company and trying to collaborate with a fan artist, I think there goes more into that, like legally, obviously, and also it's a big risk, obviously. So I think they need to test the waters how people respond to MegaMan, and they actually took a small risk by working with Blur Studios. So the Love, Death and Robot guys, they created a new series for Amazon that comes out in December. You heard probably about it, Secret Levels.
Yeah,
and there will be one MegaMan episode. Yeah, and there will be one MegaMan episode. So I think that's we'll see from then how people respond to that, and maybe Capcom will see, okay, people like this stuff. Okay, let's put more money into that and maybe contact Niko to finally do that film.
Yeah, but it's a tricky thing because like looking back at the history of kind of game adaptations for the big screen, it worked out for shorter animations like the Love, Death and Robots usually, or the series like Arcane did very well.
Yeah.
But a lot of these are not really very successful in big movies. Like
they still try to find their way, like, because video games are such a different medium than movies. So they are trying to find the formula, and recently it became more and more. There were some successes. So yeah, Arcane, for example, amazing. So my hope is that they slowly figure the process out and how to adapt this video game concept to just 2 hours of screen time. I'm very hopeful for it, and I hope that I can also contribute in that space to show that, okay, video games can also be adapted to even a short film that can be interesting, and you don't need to put in everything from the game to be interesting. So yeah, we'll see. My fingers crossed that MegaMan gets his spotlight again after 25 years or so.
Yeah, Sonic hit the big screens.
Yeah.
I think the next one is coming up.
Movie, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did it very well. Also with the Super Mario movie, it is possible. It's a complicated landscape, I believe. Studios want to make money, and filmmakers don't want to just adapt something one by one. They also want to put their own style into something. Many ideas clash, so it's a very complex process, filmmaking. Yeah. So that
it's even trickier. I think it's even trickier after the pandemic, like where with all the market shifts that happened, and really movie business is so unpredictable right now. Like even it's not even a matter of how good a movie is. Really, sometimes I've just recently rewatched the Dungeons and Dragons, The Honor Among Thieves. I think it's an amazing movie. It's very entertaining. I had the impression of like watching the first Pirates of the Caribbean. It's very fun. Yeah. It's so it's easy to watch. It's funny.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's got a very good representation of a D&D session, so to speak. I used to play role playing.
Yeah,
it's a very good movie,
but I'm very envious of people who play D&D. Yeah, I heard that it wasn't super successful, but in the D&D landscape, it's very cherished, I believe.
Yeah, and it wasn't a success in the cinema, but right now I've read that it's kind of storming the Netflix space and stuff as a hit. So to speak.
That makes me very happy. That shows that niche. It's kind of niche, the movie, or it tackles a niche audience, even though D&D is like one of the biggest things ever in the world. But still, if you ask your average person, D&D is not like one of the things that everybody talks about. But it shows that the fan base is big enough to carry the success of a movie, for sure. It's just maybe that people aren't that much moviegoers anymore, because we all, as you said, from the pandemic, streaming is now the big thing. So yeah,
we'll see how it goes. Like I've seen the D&D and stuff like that. It's making everything is making circles and connected. I've just realized when I was doing the research for the MegaMan series, which I didn't know much about.
Yeah,
I found out that the characters really resembled to me one tabletop game that I'm really enjoying.
Okay,
it's called King of Tokyo. I think in English it's called King of Tokyo. It's about monsters. It's a simple tabletop game about monsters attacking the Tokyo capital, and the monsters there the characters that you are as a player, they're very reminiscent of the MegaMan series. It's like
interesting.
There's like a Godzilla kind of thing, a penguin, like a cyber kitty, like animal-based bots. Generally, they're looking like that. So very much like the Mavericks from MegaMan. And I read about who developed the game. And it turned out that it was the guy, I think he was called Richard Garfield, and he's the guy who invented Magic the Gathering. So
okay, well there you go.
Very very interesting stuff. Like it's a good game and developed by the same guy. So everything's making circles. I wonder when we will see something developed by DemNikoArt.
We
won't be even aware.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, my one of my dreams would be to work on like a Love, Death and Robots episode. I don't know if they are still doing more of those because they work now on the Secret Levels thing. But even that, working with Blur Studios would definitely be a big dream of mine, definitely, for sure, because it's that type of filmmaking that I realized is perfect for me, that I love the themes, love the topics, love the style. So that would be already enough. So I'm not really interested in, if Hollywood would knock on my door, I probably would do something with that. But when you would ask me, okay, what would be like the perfect big thing that you would like to work on or support, I wouldn't go for a big Hollywood movie, because I know how the VFX landscape looks currently. Like, I have many friends that work in VFX, and it's tough. It's very tough. It's similar to the video games industry. That's also like work-wise, it's very unreliable, and there are very many uncertainties. And even if something's successful, it doesn't guarantee that you keep your job. So I think I wouldn't want to go into that landscape, but smaller studios, smaller productions, I would love to be part of it, because the bigger the better. I don't have that mindset I want to see my credits at the end of a Marvel movie. That's not really my pursuit. I want to have fun doing something, and I heard that oftentimes in VFX especially, oftentimes it's not really fun because of all the pressure and uncertainties, and all the circumstances around the production are, at least currently, aren't that great. They can be, but currently apparently they're not. So that's not something I'm striving for. I'm striving for a nice work environment, having fun while doing something, and also the work being interesting.
Yeah, I think the approach really works. Seeing the series develop, like, it's definitely going on an upward, trajectory. So
so far, yes. Yeah, so I wouldn't mind just staying by myself and doing the series, and it being successful enough that I can have a sustainable life. So to have some form of income. I don't know, not just Patreon, but in general, maybe there are some other forms. But just staying with my series and seeing how people are happy about it, that already gives me so much like joy, and I think like accomplished enough that I'm perfectly happy with it. So even if Capcom never asked me to do anything, as long as I can keep doing my series, as soon as I have a roof over my head and I can eat something, and people are enjoying my stuff, and I get so many nice and overwhelming messages sometimes, how people are inspired by my work, or they finally dive back into the games, or it rekindled their passion from their childhood because they remember the games from then, and suddenly seeing those characters in that new light, that really like brought back like this flash of emotions, what they were back in their childhood. And that really, it's the greatest feeling I can imagine, being a creator, for people to tell you I feel like a child again. You know, like that scene in Ratatouille, the game with the food critic. He tries just this one piece of food, and suddenly he is zoomed back into his childhood. When people tell me that something like that happened to them because they watched my movies, it's like, seriously, I could almost tear up listening to that, because it's just the best thing. So yeah, as I said, if nothing comes out of it, nothing bigger, then I don't mind, because I still have those films. I contributed to pop culture in a very small way, but still people are happy about it. So that's all I care about in the end.
Yeah, amazing. Like, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I hope this was also like part of
thank you.
a nice environment.
Yeah. Thanks you very much.
Thanks again for taking the time for being on the show. And
of course. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. I love talking about Blender all day, every day, and also about my work. I don't get the chance to do that very often, because here in Düsseldorf, I don't have that many people from the industry. So, or in general, like doing that kind of work. So as long as I get the opportunity to talk about that with people, I'm all for it. So my pleasure.
Yeah, luckily the Blender conference is coming, so you'll have plenty of time.
Nerding out for 5 days non-stop. I'm all for it.
So thank you again, and
yeah, thanks a lot.
I hope we see some new episodes coming very soon.
Just wait for the next year, and then maybe a new episode will be out back.
And while waiting, just go and watch all the 5 episodes and everything else that's on your channel.
On loop, over and over again.